Konnichiwa. Last week we talked about how to learn Japanese from anime, and we found out that the only effective way to do it is to use anime in Japanese with Japanese subtitles. The next question, of course, is where do we get Japanese anime with Japanese subtitles? And how do we use it to the best effect so that we can really learn Japanese? It's much easier now than it was even a few years ago to get Japanese anime with Japanese subtitles. There are several free sites aimed at learners where you can watch streamed anime with Japanese subtitles just the way you watch videos here on YouTube. I'm not going to mention any particular ones because they do change from time to time, and I'll put a link in the information section below to a page where I keep the resources up to date. If you know any that I haven't included, please let me know and I'll include them. They mostly have a fairly similar feature set. You can turn on or off the Japanese subtitles. There are also English subtitles which you can use, and you need to be very, very careful about this. I'll talk about their use a little later. You can usually jump through the subtitles from one subtitle to the next or to the one before it by using the arrow keys, and this is a very useful feature. And most of them also have a dictionary where you can select or hover on a word to get the reading of the kanji and a definition. These are often accurate, occasionally not, and I recommend using a different method for this purpose, both because it's somewhat more accurate and also for another reason, which we'll go into in a minute. So how do you actually go about learning Japanese from your first anime? Well, you start watching it. The first subtitle is the first sentence you have to deal with, and you just treat it like any other sentence. Don't think about sitting back and letting the anime roll by you. You're dealing with it sentence by sentence at first. So you look at the sentence, you look at that subtitle. Do you know all the words in it? If you don't, you need to find out what the words are that you don't know, and you need to learn them. And the best method to do this is to get another resource, and that's called Yomi-chan. This is a plugin for your browser. It works with Firefox or Chrome, and once you've got this installed, you can hover over a word. You'll get this box, which has the reading of any kanji and an English definition. If you're a bit more advanced, we need to think about Japanese definitions, but that's a topic for another video. Now once you have this box up, and you have it set up with your Anki, you just have to press this button to make an Anki card. It will automatically, with one click, make an Anki card with the word on the front in kanji if it is kanji, and on the back you'll have the reading, you'll have the definition, and you'll have the sentence from the anime in which it appears. You'll also have, in most cases, probably in all cases while you're dealing with elementary vocabulary, the audio of the word on the back of your card, spoken by a native Japanese speaker.
簡単
All of these things are important. If you want to hear the word while you're actually in the anime, you can also click this button here to hear that native speaker pronunciation.
簡単
You probably won't need that because you've just heard it spoken, but if you want to hear a different speaker speaking the word to get it clear in your mind, you can also use this. I should mention, while we're talking about pronunciation, that some of the streamed Japanese anime services do have hiragana that you can turn on and off. That is hiragana telling you the pronunciation of the kanji. But I should warn you that this is, certainly at the time of speaking, not reliably accurate. It seems to be auto-generated from the kanji readings, and a substantial minority of the time it gives you the wrong reading. So don't depend on that hiragana. Depend on the readings in Yomi-chan and the spoken pronunciation that you can get in Yomi-chan, and of course on the audio from the anime itself. Now, why are we making Anki cards as we listen? Because if you are learning Japanese through anime by the method I recommend, this is where you're getting your vocabulary. You've got some basic vocabulary before you start, because it's going to be very difficult to start with absolutely none. But from now on, you'll be getting your vocabulary from the anime, and you'll be getting your kanji from the anime too. And this is where Anki becomes particularly important. If you follow the method I outlined in my previous video, you'll be putting the soundtrack of the anime onto your phone or your iPod or whatever, and you'll be listening to it again and again and again when you're not at the computer watching anime, and that's going to help you internalize the vocabulary, but it's not going to help you get the kanji. Now, I'm going to talk in a future video about the strategy for memorizing kanji, but the important thing at this stage is that we're learning kanji not out of kanji books, not out of kanji decks, not as abstract entities in their own with English keywords. We're learning kanji as words, as we come across them in our anime. And Anki is going to allow us to learn those kanji at the same time as we learn the vocabulary. Now, once you've dealt with the vocabulary in your sentence, you need to look at the structure. Now that is why I think it's important to follow my structure course at least for the first 12 to 15 lessons before you start any of this. After that, you should still carry on with structure because you're going to need more. But the important thing is to be able to see how that sentence fits together, how it works. And if you've followed my course, you'll know the basics of how to do that. If you've learned Japanese out of a textbook, it's going to be an awful lot harder because they don't give you the structure. Alright, so now let's talk about the English subtitles, because you might say, well, isn't the simplest thing to do to just look at the English subtitle and see what it means? Well, no it isn't, for a number of reasons. The first reason is that if you do that, you're fudging the structure. You need to look at the structure and see how it actually works. The second reason is also structural, and it's this. English doesn't work the same way as Japanese. So what the English subtitles are telling you a lot of the time is not precisely what the Japanese is saying, but what an English speaker would be saying if they were saying something similar. And that has to be the case a lot of the time because the languages are just structured very differently. And you're not trying to learn English structure, you already know that. You're trying to internalize Japanese structure. So are the English subtitles actually useful at all? Well, here's what I'd say about them. First of all, please don't ever have them on while the anime is running. You should make that an absolute rule and don't break it. Use the English subtitles only when you really need them and only on still screens. What they're there for is to help you out when you've absolutely no idea what the Japanese means or what it implies. Use them with caution because they may not be accurate and they may be quite misleading about the structure of Japanese. So your first stop is to work out the structure of that Japanese as far as you can. When I was using this method, we didn't have these streamed sites, and I didn't even have access to English subtitles. I could have got it if I wanted it, but I didn't. And if there was something I really couldn't get, well, I just had to skip it. And to be honest, I don't think this is a bad approach at all. But if you want to use the English subtitles, please use them just as a helper on still screens, and please take them with a large pinch of salt. Now once you're happy that you've understood that sentence, you move on to the next one. So it's going to be a slow process, but you work through the anime, understanding each sentence as you get to it. If you really can't understand one, either let it go, or if you must, use the English subtitles. And then, as we've said before, put the soundtrack onto your MP3 player, your phone, or whatever you're going to use and keep listening to it. Whenever there isn't a good reason not to be listening, you should be listening. Anki, you must review every day. This is the other rule you really have to keep, because Anki is really based on the idea that you're using it every day. It will space the repetitions at a pace that's right for someone who's using it every day, and if you don't use it every day, it'll mount up. However, if you're confident about a word, you can hit the easy button on it, and it will get further and further away. It recedes into the future as you hit the easy button a few times. But that's only if you get it right. If you're sure you know it, you can start getting rid of it. And if you don't really know it, then you shouldn't be getting rid of it. Of course, you'll have a huge advantage of learning the words through audio as well. So you'll be getting rid of a lot of words much earlier than someone else who's doing Anki. But the important thing here is that you've got to pin those words, and if you're not listening to this particular anime for a while, and the word doesn't come up for a while, Anki's going to keep it pinned so you don't lose it completely. And the other thing that Anki is doing is making sure that you learn that kanji. Now, you may be learning kanji by other means, but there's no need to. I learned nearly all my kanji by this method. You don't learn to write them this way. And whether you think it's important to learn to write kanji or not is entirely up to you. And the first question I would ask myself is, how often do I write anything with a pen or a pencil in my own language? I never write anything. Nothing at all. Not even shopping lists. Nothing. But then I'm a droid. I write a lot in English and Japanese, but I do it with a keyboard or a screen. I never do it with a pen or a pencil. And if you're like that, the thing to consider is this. Not just how much time do you want to spend on acquiring a skill that you're not going to use, but also that if you're not going to use it in everyday life, you're going to lose it. What you don't use, you lose. I can't see the point of practicing writing kanji just in order to be able to practice writing kanji. But whether you want to do that or not, that's up to you. But if you're using this method to learn kanji, and you can become kanji literate by this method, then you've got to keep up with your Anki. Because together with encountering them in anime and other material, which you'll start tackling as you become more proficient with anime, is how you're going to learn kanji. The only study part of it, the only part that isn't actually reading, enjoying, and living in Japanese, will be Anki. But precisely because of that, you've got to be consistent with your Anki. So as you see, the anime method is really very simple indeed. This is all there is to it. Work through it, sentence by sentence. Listen to it after you've worked through it. Rinse and repeat. Is this terribly boring? Well, I didn't find it so, and other people that have used this method don't find it so, because you really are enjoying the anime. Slowly, it's true, but you are enjoying it. An interesting little story is that I watched a certain series of anime in the early days, and then I watched some later series of the same anime later on, and it struck me that I was not as close to the characters later on as I had been earlier. I didn't get this sense of knowing them absolutely intimately. And it struck me after a while that the reason for this was not any change in the anime, but the fact that I just wasn't spending so long with each episode. I was watching a 20-minute episode in 20 minutes, instead of taking a whole week to work my way through it. What I learned from that was that although it was difficult working through it very, very slowly, there were also advantages to that. There was a depth of feeling and sensation. There was an intimacy to that process of living with a single episode for a long time. Would I go back to watching anime that way? No, I wouldn't. But Am I glad that I had that experience? Not just from a learning point of view, but from an emotional point of view? Yes, I am glad. Learning Japanese through anime is the first step into your Japanese life. And again, this is just me, but I would recommend that you don't think of it as just practicing Japanese or just learning a language. Language isn't there to be practiced or to be learned. Language is there as a means of communication. It's there to be enjoyed. It's there to make you laugh, to make you cry, to amaze you, to allow you to communicate with other people. Language isn't a skill. It's a mode of life. And it's because people regard language as a skill to be practiced rather than a life to be lived that they never end up becoming proficient. That won't happen to you, because you're going to learn Japanese through anime. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below, and I will answer as usual. I'd like to thank my gold Kokeshi patrons, my producer angels, who make these videos possible, and all my patrons and supporters on Patreon and everywhere. You'll find my red Kokeshi patrons credited in the information section below, underneath those vital links. I'd also like to thank you for attending this lesson. Korekara mo yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Class dismissed.